if you want, just share a little bit about where you're coming from, maybe what grade level you're in if you're in school right now, and then if you are experienced in advocacy, and if you want, you can also share maybe the issue that you advocated on behalf of, the organization you worked with, just so I can see where y'all are coming from. And I'll give you a couple minutes, or not a couple minutes, maybe one. I have a Christmas song stuck in my head.
See lots of people typing.
That's the one thing about Click Meeting. It's really nice because you can have a lot of people on here. But I love being able to see people. Ooh, education director, campus research center, and former Ignite intern. Whoa, 2013.
It's great to have you.
People typing, so I'll just let them get their answers in. Yeah, but like Michelle said, oh, sorry, were you saying something?
I was going to say, if you've participated in any of the Ignite the Capitals with Ignite, also feel free to drop that in too.
Yes. Just where you're coming from, Kadita, which you already said, but if you are experienced in advocacy at all, maybe the issue that you worked on and the organization that you worked with. Yeah, and like Michelle said, my name is Bree, coming from right outside of Houston. Just want to preface today's presentation by saying that I am by no means an expert in virtual advocacy, but I just wanted to share tips and possible starting steps you can do as we try to navigate this virtual world that we live in. And I also want to mention that, virtual advocacy is not new at all. Plenty of organizations have been doing this for years. So if you have some expertise in virtual advocacy, feel free to share at any point along during the presentation, like if you have your own way that you do this thing or any extra strategies you want to add on the topic we're talking about. Ooh, We Bleed Red, NC State, free pads and tampons. Yes, menstrual equity. Okay, I'll give like 20 more seconds and then I'm going to start out. And if you see me looking on screen, I'm looking at my notes. My mom has another monitor. I'm working in her little room office right now. So I got a cool setup going. Alabama Institute for Social Justice, grassroots community organizer. Awesome. Racial justice, environmental justice, gender equity. Whoa, lots of issues. All very important. Okay, I think that's everybody. Okay, so let me just start off. Let me see if we can get this. All right, okay. So I just wanted to share the definition of virtual advocacy. I borrowed this from Alliance for Justice. Just if anybody wants to be clear that today we're going to be talking about using digital technology. So I know in previous webinars, we've talked about letters and things like that. But today we're just going to be focusing on ways that we can use technology in a way that supports, defends, or pleads on behalf of others, other communities. So, like I said, it's not new. Organizations have been doing virtual advocacy for years, and I'm sure that the people who have talked about their advocacy experience have experience with social media, emailing, calling. So this is not new at all, but we're just going to talk a little bit more about specific strategies and maybe how that's relevant to the environment we're living in now with COVID-19. So let's break it down. All right, so first, before we jump into this, if you haven't already shared, even if you are not experienced in advocacy at all, I want everyone to share maybe one issue that they are passionate about and willing to advocate on behalf of. So if you can drop that into the chat box, it can be menstrual equity, voting registration, but just share one issue. Awesome. Okay. So the reason why I want y'all to share one issue is I think this presentation will be a lot more intentional and easier to digest if you can focus on one issue throughout this hour that we have together, because I feel like, many of us, there are many issues that we care about. It's not like voting registration or criminal justice reform is the single thing that drives us. And in advocacy, it can feel overwhelming to have all these issues in your head, and it can be stunting or paralyzing in a way if you think about, oh, how do I start when there are so many things that I want to work on? So for today, I just want you to think about this one issue that you've mentioned. So hopefully that'll make today's presentation easier to digest a bit. So these 5 that I focusing today on social media campaigns, directly contacting your policymakers through emailing and calling, starting online interest groups, hosting or joining training webinars, kind of like this one, and educating yourself. So these are all ways that you can lead advocacy efforts or support efforts that are already happening. So let's move on. And again, if you have anything you want to add as I'm talking, feel free to drop it in the chat box. I want this to be as much of a discussion as possible. I hate the idea of just droning on and on and on. Okay, so social media campaigns. Now that you've identified your issue that you're thinking about today, it should help you identify the platform that you're using, right? So with research on social media, we know that different platforms have different median ages, that they just have different demographics on what their average user looks like. So we know with Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, those users are going to be a lot younger on average than things like Facebook. So if your issue is something that maybe you think more young people care about, you may want to, pick the platform that has most of your audience. It's just going to be ultimately a more efficient use of your time, I'll say. There are definitely ways that you can reach out onto other platforms to expand awareness. But in where I'm coming from today, I want to focus on, getting to your base, getting to your audience, and then making as efficient and effective message as possible. Sorry. All right, so consider your age. I also wanted to mention an example. So this is just an example that came to mind as I was creating this presentation. So if you have TikTok or Snapchat, I want you to think about the Truth Campaign. So if you know what the Truth Campaign is, it's a campaign to get young people to quit vaping, to quit juuling. And so in these ads, you see people doing ridiculous things where they're like jumping into a pool with a Juul strapped to their chest and things like that. So whether or not that campaign has been successful in getting people to actually stop vaping, it's still something that you can't ignore, right? Because they're ads, you can't really skip them. So users are forced to, intake that message, and whether or not they choose to stop vaping, it's still in their mind. So they're catering to their base, right? They're catering to young people by being on platforms where most young people are. And they're using really effective media types. So that's the next thing that we're going to talk about. Media type being photos, videos, written out descriptions, so like articles, just written tweets. Those are all things you have to consider whenever you are designing your social media campaign, right? So think about what will be the most impactful based on what your issue is. So if your issue is you want to advocate for more wildlife protection, what's going to be the most impactful based on the audience that you're trying to get? So maybe their age, what platform you're using, and the support that already exists on that platform. So if you want to advocate for wildlife protection, are you going to make a video showing wildlife destruction and to get people to focus on the bad parts and hopefully inspire action? Are you going to make a video focusing on everything that's going right, to instill more of a positive reaction and get people to support what's already happening? These are all things that you have to map out. You have to map out every single intention. What is the specific message of this post that I'm going to be doing, and what do I want people to feel from that post? Those are all going to affect how you talk about the issue. So there's something that I wanted to mention here on the next bullet for skills needed. There is this website that I'm actually going to screen share right now because I think it's really awesome. Okay. Let me get this. Okay. Michelle, is it sharing my screen?
No.
Oh, no. I knew this would happen. My entire screen. Yes, share. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Yes, open in browser. Oh, well, never mind. It's not going to work.
What's the link? I can paste it in the chat box.
It's KTB. Actually, I can also do it. I'm going to post it in here. This is also, so all the websites that I'm going to talk about in this presentation, I have listed at the very end in a resources slide. So if you want this presentation afterwards, I can send it to Michelle and then we can see if it's possible to get it to you. But this website that I just posted, it's called Community Toolbox, and it's created by the Center for Community Health and Development at the University of Kansas. But they have public information, I guess. So easily accessible chapters, basically with step-by-step guidance on community building skills. So if it takes, it's pretty easy to navigate this page, but if you are on their homepage and you click on the section on learning a skill, sorry if you can hear my dog's barking, it should pull up like table of contents and toolkits. So the way I navigate it is I go to the table of contents and it breaks down every single chapter they have on community building. So there's an overview, community assessment, communications, developing a strategic plan and organizational structure. So for the people who talked about starting an Ignite chapter, I think this is also worth checking out. But if I go down to the bottom, there is a chapter on effective advocacy, and there's a specific chapter on conducting a direct action campaign and using social media. So that's where I got these 4 skills from. If you want to check it out, I super encourage that because it outlines every single thing you could think of, and then they also have all of their resources on there. So the resources they have listed include like 10 free social media monitoring sites. That's a huge part of running a social media campaign that I think gets neglected a lot is, looking at the people, how many people have interacted with your post, what that interaction looks like, and things like that. So tons of resources. Please go to that page. I think it's super awesome. But we don't have enough time to just go really in depth on that part. And my next point that I want to talk about is how can research help us? I'm going to drop another link in the chat to an article. So this article is written by a professor at George Mason University, and he talks about how social media is already being used by advocacy organizations because, like I said at the beginning, virtual advocacy is not new at all, and it helps to know how organizations are already using social media, because I think that can also help you design your social media campaign. So if you have time, look at that article. I'm just going to share one of the biggest takeaways that I got from this article, which is that out of the people that they surveyed, social media platforms are still seen as more biased than traditional media, which is pretty, I feel like if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Whenever people think about traditional media, they think there are more checks along the way that ensure the information that you're getting is true. But with what we know about traditional media and, just different issues, we know that that's not entirely true, that everything people hear on TV are not, it's not pure facts every single time. But this is also important because if you understand that there may be a barrier in your social media campaigns, that even if you are trying to outline your issue in the most unbiased way possible, using pure facts, people may still see it as biased. So just take that into consideration as you design your social media campaign. Like, am I going to post this from my own personal account? Is it going to be taken differently if I post this from my organization's account? And, what's the reputation of the organization that you're advocating on behalf of? Are they known to be biased or unbiased? So these are all things to take into consideration. And then just to bring it back to what we are going through now, I wanted to offer this question as a chance for people to share. Because I know I personally have been on social media a lot more since we have gone into quarantine. So I just wanted to see your opinions on what you've noticed about social media use, and maybe your opinions on, whether virtual advocacy at this time is something that you would want to do or you think would be received. So if you want to, you can just drop your opinions. If not, I'll just move on.
While people are putting in their takeaways from what they've seen on social media, what are some examples that you've seen that like really caught your eye and you thought were a little bit more groundbreaking than what we've seen previously? Or are there any? Sorry, my pup is going crazy.
Me too. Wait, Michelle, were you asking me or?
Yeah.
Oh, you were asking me. Okay.
Yeah. Have you seen any?
Have I seen any social media campaigns that have been different? I don't think so. And I think that's something that is a missed opportunity. But I think it's also challenging because, right now we all feel like we're in a weird limbo. And I know for a lot of people, advocating for different issues is not their priority right now. And it's also not their priority to see maybe things on their social media that are uncomfortable. I think right now people are really searching for that feeling of comfort and knowing that things are okay. So it makes it difficult in that sense.
Yeah.
So people are utilizing, many people are participating in challenges. responding. That is really true. I have been seeing so many of those Instagram story bingos, challenges, much more posting. Yeah, people are bored. So these are these are definitely ways that we can think about, like, is there a way to utilize virtual bingo boards in the social media campaign that you do? Like, if your campaign was on menstrual equity, is there a way you can make a bingo board on like things to know about menstrual equity, and have people check off everything that they're aware of? It definitely is worth considering.
It definitely highlights the fact that people are very engaged right now, and so you're not having to like reach this audience of people that are nowhere to be found, right? They're like, now if you're going to do it, is the time to do it because people are so engaged.
For sure. All right, I'm going to segue into our next one, which is emailing and calling policymakers. So I'm going to drop another link. I'm just dropping links on email. So the link that I just put in the chat is an article that was published in the New York Times in 2016 after Donald Trump's election win. So this article is a little old, but I think the message still holds true. And they talk about this woman had published a guide on talking to legislators right after the presidential election, because a lot of people were, really active and fired up at the time, and really politically involved in general. So in her article, she talked about why emailing necessarily is not the most effective way to talk to a policymaker. And she was a staffer, maybe in Utah, I think it was. And she was saying that, whenever you email, it's really effective in showing, the staffers, because it's ultimately their job to sort through all the communications with constituents. It's really effective for them to be able to see, okay, this is where it came from, there's record of it, and then they just go into their data sheet or whatever way they have recording, what constituents are talking to them, and mark, okay, they cared about this issue, and then boom, that's it. But the biggest complaint is, whenever you email, maybe you don't get the most thoughtful response to your email, maybe you don't get any at all. But with calling, it's communicating in a way that you can't be ignored. So, but this all depends if they pick up the phone, which, and now, offices are kind of all over the place. So if you have experience, if you've called a legislator during this time since we started quarantining, please drop that experience below. But ultimately, whenever you call, even though it may feel uncomfortable or weird, you're putting a voice to the issue, and you are most likely going to be a lot more personal and, I guess, vulnerable than you are in an email, which can feel weird, but it may help in getting your point across. So she talks about how this is even more effective at the local level. If there are less constituents calling in, you can call in, you're more likely to be answered. And if you want to talk more about an issue, you can be directed to one of the policy directors on their team to get more in-depth information on, is my legislator supporting this? Why or why not? So it's just an effective way to really get people to focus on you, which emails are great, but ultimately you're probably more effective doing both. So I just wanted to drop the article. If you read it, it's still pretty interesting.
If you have called, sorry, if you have called or emailed your policymakers and you're on the call, can you just tell us yes or no? And then if there were any, like, especially if you called, were there any like how did you overcome your fear of calling, if you had a fear of calling?
Yes, yeah. And as you're doing that, I want to point y'all to the graphic that I have on here. I took this from some organization in Missouri, but they have this really awesome one pager, and it basically has 3 steps outlined of the call for a max 5-minute call. You want your introduction to be maximum of a minute, where you just talk about where you are from, whether or not you're a constituent, or not whether or not you are a constituent, but that you are a constituent, and why you're calling in 1 or 2 sentences. So maybe that's, I'm calling because I want to know if my legislator is supporting this bill. And then next, you will go into your story, why you believe in supporting this bill, any statistics you may have, but ultimately any personal beliefs to supplement what you are supporting.
A really great question
came in from Layla.
Yeah.
Is it more effective to talk to state and local lawmakers? So I'm open to other people's answers on this, but ultimately, it's my personal belief that, local politics can be the most impactful on your daily life in the communities that you're advocating for. And I think a lot of people, kind of sweep that under the rug, or I guess don't realize how impactful it can be, especially because since less people are doing it, your voice will stand out more, especially if you come across as very, very passionate about what you're doing, and you show them, like, maybe not a lot of people from my community are talking directly to you about this issue, but they still believe in it. And I have this, and this many people who have agreed with me, who are maybe from my neighborhood or from this county, from this district.
I love what Kadita said about building relationships with legislators and just checking in to see how they're doing, because people are so used to asking them for things versus just checking in.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let's see. Kaya, no one has answered, but I was able to leave a great voicemail, which also was less anxiety and a great way to practice without interruption. Yeah, for sure. I think, it is kind of fun if you just practice on a friend, but personally, I'm not as comfortable practicing with a friend, and I'll just practice alone. And I'll just record myself like on a voice memo saying what I want to say, and then listen back to the voice memo and be like, oh, that sounded dumb, or oh, that sounded pretty good. See,
Bree, do you have, is there a resource that you've seen previously that sort of outlines like a script that they can use that is fairly straightforward?
I mean, usually I think a lot of the scripts that people have for letters can also translate well into a call. But I think whenever if you are uncomfortable with a call, most of the time, for me, I guess the fear is that the other person will judge me for not knowing what I'm talking about. I think that's my personal fear whenever I'm talking to people who, I guess, people like legislators, people in power.
Yeah.
So if it comes from a place of, thinking you'll be seen as not smart or not important, I just try to personalize the person on the other end and be like, most of the time it's a staffer, so they're, I don't want to say not as important, but in my head it helps to be like, this is just another average person. They just go to work every day like me, doing their 9 to 5, which I feel like for staffers it's not really that little. It's definitely a lot more. But they also enjoy getting to hear from constituents and answering the calls. If you are remembering, those little bullet points that they're on that slide, if you are honest, if you're polite, I think that helps a lot. They are going to receive you in a more positive way. And I think that helps to build builds up the conversation in your head. Because if you call thinking like, oh, I'm really mad about this issue, and whenever I call, they're going to hate me and they're not going to be as passionate about it as I am, and blah, blah, blah. You're really working yourself up to probably not have the best call. But if you come from a place of, this is something I really care about, but I'm gonna wait to call until I can, gather myself and talk in a really coherent way. Because whenever I'm feeling any sort of mad, sad, anxious emotion, I think it just sounds like I'm gonna cry, and I feel like the person on the other end would be like, "Is she okay?" I'm not okay, but maybe I should call whenever I'm okay. Yeah, if you come from a place of, I've gathered myself, I know the person on the other end is just a person. Maybe it helps for you to imagine that you're talking to a computer or a robot, or you're talking to your mom or a friend on the other end. You just have to do whatever works for you. But yeah, I think that's how I get over my phone fear.
Yeah, those are really good points. And I think I think too, I like whenever I'm calling like to fight about a bill or something, I'm always going in thinking the person's going to be like against me. So I think like reshifting your mindset and being like, these people are here because they are here to hear me out, and they're not gonna like be mean to me. And so, doing what I need to do and coming in with a positive attitude is probably the better route.
I've also heard that people can hear when you're smiling over the phone, which I feel like when I think about that, I don't know how true that is, but you can kind of get what a person's vibe is based on how they're talking. So if you come into a call, maybe smile a little. Maybe that'll help you feel less anxious about what you're doing. I mean, the scientific effects of smiling on your emotions and your mindset is another thing. So you can look that up if you're more interested in it, because it helps. But maybe that could be another thing too, like watch a funny video before your call, or just get in a headspace where you're feeling comfortable, and then once you're there, you'd be like, okay, this is the best time to make the call. I'm feeling good. Okay. Margot says, use a platform to bucket the calls so staffers will record in the database. Yes. Yes. Okay. There are federal laws to make it illegal for legislators to not record call data. Great. But I'm not sure that all local legislators have those regulations. Oh, thanks, Margot. I did not know that. I am going to get to the next slide because it looks like we're already 30 minutes in. This next point is about creating interest groups. So I am in a ton of Facebook groups, and maybe if you don't have a Facebook, I recommend getting one, just because there are other social media platforms, to me, aren't as effective in really collaborating and engaging with people. But in Facebook groups, it can be really, really easy to, post, hey, I'm from this area. Does anybody know any advocacy organizations that are working on this thing? It's super easy to join these groups too. Most of the time, if you're trying to find a group of like students of color at this university, if it doesn't exist, I think you should create one. There may be entry questions like, who are you? Why do you care about this? And that's normally just to make sure that they're keeping the trolls out, because there are a lot of those on Facebook. But definitely consider creating a Facebook group if you can't find one. So for example, just to share a personal group that I'm in a group called Latinx Scholars. And it is just a place for anyone who identifies as Latinx in research or academia or in college to join and talk about whatever. So a lot of people post political things on there. People post maybe like, I'm going through this personal experience. What can I do? Looking for support. And there are something like 20,000 people on that page. So going back to the issues that many of you mentioned, like voting registration, criminal justice reform, reproductive justice, I definitely recommend going on Facebook and Google or searching like, are there any people in my area that care about this? If it's not in your specific community, is there one at your state level? Like people in North Carolina that care about menstrual equity, you know? And that can be a good place to start on just expanding more people in your network that can possibly help you advocate for these issues. I wanted to mention that there are organizations that are hosting virtual training meetings like this. I know in Texas, I don't know if anyone here is from Texas, but there are organizations called Texas Rising and Move Texas that are trying to transition into doing virtual programming like this. So if there are organizations that you already work with for advocacy, if they are not doing these, you should recommend them because I think they're pretty awesome. Whether or not people join them, I think is up to awareness and can be where social media campaigns come in. And then this last piece, just how to search advocacy and interest groups. I just wanted to share this if nobody has ever looked up, you know, how to get involved at all. So no shame at all. I hope I didn't sort of put that across there, but I just wanted to put this, if you don't know where to start, a good place would be if you want to search things at a local level. So I'm from a city called Alvin. I could look up Alvin Mental Health Advocacy Organization. Or if I want to look up at a bigger level, Houston Mental Health Advocacy Organization, or even bigger, Southwest, South, maybe for a specific community group. Because advocacy happens at all sorts of levels, right? There are grassroots organizations, there are statewide, you know, more broad and general organizations. And if there aren't any specific ones that focus on your specific issue, what is the issue that falls under, right? So menstrual equity, if there's not one in your nearby areas, there are women's health organization. And if you can you contact them and say, hey, I'm interested in advocating for this. Can I work with your team? Is there a space for me to join you? I'm a big fan of cold emailing and calling, just because I have really been taught that you have to make the ask, and it's very uncomfortable, but the worst answer you could get is no, you know, and even if you get that no, there is life after the no, which I think is hard for me to even accept sometimes whenever I'm trying to ask, because I think even if I get told no, you know, like that's the end of the road, it's not. You know, there are other doors, other people you can go to, other organizations that you can approach. So I just wanted to share that little bit right there before we talk about specifically holding webinars. So I wanted to share some that I found that have free options, especially if you don't have like a school account that gives you more access, or if you don't have the funds to pay like $15, $20 a month to have options that allow for more participants. These are just some that I found that are free and some of their limitations. Cyberlink U, Meeting, Zoom Basic, Skype, which I have Zoom Basic with my school email. I'm not sure if it works with your personal email, but I think it does. I didn't want to put it if it wasn't true though. Skype, Google Hangouts, Blue Jeans has a 30-day free trial that you could try out, and this one called Life Size. So if you are interested in hosting your own webinars like this, these are all websites that you can use. Some of them don't require an extra app download. So like Click Meeting doesn't require an extra app download, but Zoom does, which I think those are worth considering because those can be a barrier in getting people to join your meetings. So if anyone has used these or has any that aren't on this list, feel free to drop them in the chat box. or if anyone has a preference for any of these, feel free to drop those in a chat box as well. I think whenever you, like if you are communicating with people in any way, like if you are starting an Instagram page that will be all about menstrual equity and you are communicating with your followers, there are different ways that you can survey them and ask them what works best. But I just wanted to point these out specifically. And then let's go to the last point, which I think is very important. That's coming from the researcher inside me, which is just to educate yourself about the issue. This means, like, do you know current data about your issue? Do you know if there's community support already? So educating yourself means also doing advocacy research. Like, do you know how many people in your local community support voter by mail laws? So is there a way that you can contact people virtually? Maybe you have like my town has a Facebook group, which we're really small. We have like 26,000 people, but that's a way that I can contact a huge amount of people in my town and just pull their opinions on what the support is and whether or not I would have people to stand behind me if this is something I wanted to advocate for in my community. If you live in a bigger city, I recognize that that is definitely a barrier and something I'm open to getting any opinions on if you have experience mobilizing people virtually in big cities. And then my last point is about data. With these, sorry, my sleep schedule is all off, so I woke up way earlier today than I'm used to. With the organizations, I wanted to say, whenever you find an advocacy organization, a lot of times, if they are a bigger organization, they may have some funds available to hire like a policy expert or a research person for your specific issue. So they will have published on their website like the data that they use to support, you know, the reason why they advocate for this issue, or, you know, policy materials with just all of the policy proposals that they support and why. So if you find a big advocacy organization that maybe you don't necessarily want to work with, or you want to do what they do at a more local level, because a lot of times these tend to be big organizations with more money, using their data to supplement your message, I think that's totally okay. And it's totally even more awesome if you are able to gather this data on your own. I'm doing a session called Participatory Action Research later this month if you want to learn more about doing research on the communities that you're living in and doing it in a way that empowers the members of your community. But in general, you know, we live in such a data-driven world that people have come to expect, you know, like, what are the statistics on this issue? Like, how important is it for me to focus this time? So like, it all depends on how you can frame your issue, and is the data there to back it up? If not, do you need to supplement your message with more personal or impactful stories to, you know, bring the whole message together? So that was just the last strategy I wanted to mention before I talked about staying up to date with policymakers. The first point sounds obvious, following their social media accounts. But now more than ever, you know, people are relying on social media to get their news. I don't know how many people are watching traditional media like broadcast TV or their local news channels, but I feel like everybody around me is looking at what they see on their Facebook or what they see on their Twitter page. So following their social media will give you a good idea of how your policymakers, I think, are reacting to what's going on and how well they are prepared to communicate with constituents in the case of a crisis. I also wanted to say that you should take, now as the time to become familiar with your government websites. Whenever you become an advocate for something, it's important to recognize the barriers that exist for the community that you're advocating for. And information access is a huge thing, especially because a lot of times, like, you'll find government websites that are not clear, that are only available in English or Spanish, which is, there are many other languages other than those, so people may not be able to read, they may not be disability friendly, they may not have access to technology to even get to these websites with the information that they need. So I think it would be really important to now not only become familiar with your official, like, city, county, state, or federal websites, but take now as the time to know, where do these websites need extra help? What are the things that we need to improve on? That way, whenever you're advocating for these communities, you're not just passing on the information that they need, but you're helping, resolve the issue at its core, which is that the website itself is not accessible. So how can we change that? And then the last part I wanted to mention, since we are in a crisis right now, and it's interesting to look at how our legislators are reacting to that, whether or not they want to acknowledge that it is a crisis. And these are all things that we should take into importance whenever we're voting. So I just wanted to leave these questions not only for you to focus on, but the people that are around you and that you can influence, get people to think about how their policymakers are communicating with constituents. Are their staffers, is their office accessible right now by phone call or email? And just in general, the rhetoric that they're using and what they're doing during this time of crisis. So I think that is my last slide. Yeah, I wanted to leave time for any questions and any opinions on, things that we didn't talk about. If anyone has any virtual advocacy experience, maybe how people are feeling, I guess, at the end of this, how they're feeling about virtual advocacy in general. Is this something that you're going to do during your time left in quarantine? Hopefully we get out of this soon. Yeah, just how are you feeling? Does anyone have anything planned out? Sorry, Michelle.
Oh, I was just going to say, Ignite is hosting 2 virtual advocacy events next week. So if you are in North Carolina, you can attend our virtual advocacy. I'm dropping that link in now, and then I'm going to put the one in for Tennessee. We are also doing one in Tennessee. If you are interested in flexing your virtual advocacy muscles, we'll be doing this next week, and that'll be led by our policy manager, Jocelyn Yao. So those are those 2 links. And then as you're thinking of additional questions and whatnot, I'm going to drop in our survey. If you can fill out the survey on today's session and let us know, one, what takeaways did you have from this session, and then 2, are there any other types of sessions that you'd like to see in the future, so that we can take that into account as we're planning for the upcoming months.
Yeah, I had fun. I think I hope everyone has some sort of takeaway and not feeling overwhelmed. I hope each of the strategies that I talked about, I think it's more effective if, like one person focuses on them and you build a team to do all of this. I don't think anyone should be really doing virtual advocacy alone, because it just feels very daunting and just like a lot in general. So I hope it inspires you to create a little team to support whatever you want to support.
Awesome. If you could give one like next step for people, something that they could do that's like not overwhelming, but something that they can do that's actionable, what would that one thing be that you would want to share with them?
I was just thinking this earlier and I had something in my head and I'm mad that it's gone. I think my best, I guess most suggested first step is to look at what the advocacy organizations around you, I guess, that you already follow are doing now. And if they're not already transitioning to, having virtual meetings or virtual information sessions, to maybe start asking for those or leading them yourself. Because right now, I don't want to say people have more time, because everyone's schedule is looking different. Everyone's making sense of all of this that's going on in different ways. But to prevent apathy, let's try to see what we can do, meet people where they're at, and just see what the organizations are already doing. And if they're not doing much, what can you do to help that? So I think especially as young people who have been on social media all of their lives, we have a special expertise on how campaigns can transition to be online and more tech focused. So how can we contribute our strengths to the organizations that are working right now? I think that would be my first step. I hope that wasn't too convoluted. My mind's all over the place.
Sorry, I had to put myself on mute because my dog went crazy.
But yeah.
I can't get the slide to pop up, but I did want to also share. We are hosting a boss. Sorry, y'all. Boss Ladies 4-day training, Monday, April 27th. And it is all about joining campaigns. We'll get that info out to y'all as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh no. I accidentally logged out of my computer. Well, if anyone has any last questions, drop them in the chat box. Still here for a couple minutes. If not, oh yay, I'm glad. Carry on about your day. Relax. I don't know if anyone has schoolwork to do, but highly recommend not procrastinating.
Thank you so much, Bree. Y'all, I also popped up the Boss Ladies training slide in here in case you're interested in joining. It'll be on our website, ignitenational.org/ignite online. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you at another webinar this week.
Yay.